Ashcroft, Colorado, 1968. A forgotten village buried in the cold mountains and forests that seemed to hold their breath. Time didn't pass there. It stalled as if something older than men held the clock hands in place. They said the town died with the mine, and the mine died with old Connor. Connor was a miner who spent his whole life digging into the earth in search of fortune. He never found gold, never found silver, only silence. And in that silence, he went mad. In 1945, his body was found deep within the mine, crushed between rocks, still gripping his pickaxe as if he was still digging. Some say he died frustrated, but never found rest. Since then, no man who dared return ever came back the same, if they came back at all. The legend whispers, old Connor still digs. On a foggy October morning, 3 lifelong friends made their way back to Ashcroft, driven by curiosity and a desire to document the forgotten history of the ghost town and its cursed mine. Eli, 52, a former soldier turned amateur photographer, ever the skeptic. Frank, 55, a lover of history and the unexplained. He believed in everything. Walter, 58, the quietest of the group, always carried a small wooden crucifix in his pocket and fear in his eyes. The road to Ashcroft already felt like a warning. Mud, fog, and a silence so thick it clung to their skin. When their old Jeep creaked to a stop at the outskirts of the ghost town, the quiet wrapped around them like a trap. Rotting houses, crooked poles, rusted signs. The town was a carcass, and the mine, the still beating heart hidden somewhere beneath the dirt. But they went on. They laughed at the stories, mocked old Connor, until they heard the sound of a pickaxe from deep within the earth. The road to Ashcroft was little more than a trail of damp dirt, suffocated by dry leaves and trees that bent inwards as if trying to block their passage. The old Jeep wheezed and coughed on every incline, coughing black smoke into the morning mist. Inside, Eli kept his eyes on the winding path, while Frank and Walter whispered in the back seat. "Do you remember what that old sheriff said?" Frank muttered, peering out into the dense woods. "That no one's gone near the mine since '47, Walter replied, clutching his crucifix tightly. "No, not just that," Frank continued. "He said it's not that the mine was abandoned, it's that it abandoned everyone who went in." Eli gave a dry chuckle. "We're just gonna take some pictures. Spend the night. No big deal." But when they reached the edge of the town, his smile vanished. Ashcroft lay drowned in fog, a corpse of a town. The buildings, once sturdy wooden homes and saloons, were now charred skeletons, eaten by time. Windows gaped like eyeless skulls. And the silence, it wasn't natural. It felt deliberate, as if something deep beneath the earth had stopped breathing, just for them. The mine sat behind a collapsed tool shed at the end of a narrow trail choked with weeds. The entrance was a gaping black wound, supported by crumbling timber that groaned even without wind. A rusted iron sign hung crookedly beside the entrance, the letters nearly erased by time. "Connor Mine, permanently closed." Walter froze. "Did you hear that?" A sound. Metal striking stone. Once, twice. "Probably an animal," Frank offered, half-heartedly. Then, a third strike, louder, and from deeper within the mountain, 3 more strikes echoing in perfect reply. They stood frozen. Then Eli lit his flashlight and pulled the rusted lever that held the wooden gate. "If we're doing this, it's now." The darkness swallowed them whole, and behind them, the gate slammed shut. Inside, the air was cold, thick, and tainted with the scent of rust, mold, and something else, something rotting. The beam of Eli's flashlight trembled as they descended into the mine. The walls were scarred with deep claw-like scratches. Rusted rails for minecarts snaked into the shadows, and old equipment lay scattered like bones. Then they heard it. Footsteps, not theirs. They froze. The lanterns flickered. Walter let out a gasp. Something had just rushed past him. Too fast. Too low. Not human. Frank swung his flashlight. A shadow darted across the tunnel, vanishing into a cloud of dust. No. Ash. Then came the whisper, a breath through stone. 3 more. 3 more. The voice seeped from the walls as if the rocks themselves were speaking. Walter slipped, his scream triggering a soft rumble overhead, loose rocks falling like pebbles of warning. "That's it. We're leaving," Eli said, voice tight. But when they turned to go back, the tunnel had changed. The way out was gone. And far ahead, a figure, still, watching. Then, without moving its feet, it began to glide toward them. The figure advanced without a sound. Eli raised his flashlight with trembling hands, but the beam dimmed the closer it got. The light didn't touch it. It bent around the shape, like the darkness rejected illumination. Frank stumbled backward, heart pounding, while Walter whispered a prayer under his breath. "Stay together," Eli hissed, drawing a rusted pistol from his coat. "We move. Now." They turned into a side tunnel, barely wide enough for the 3 of them. The walls were moist, pulsing with a strange heat. The deeper they went, the more the tunnel felt alive, like a throat swallowing them whole. The sound of scraping metal echoed behind them. The figure wasn't following fast. It was taking its time. Further in, they found a collapsed chamber filled with shattered mining tools and rotten crates. On the wall, scribbled in charcoal, "He never left." Frank's breath caught in his throat. Who? A gust of freezing air passed through the tunnel, extinguishing Eli's flashlight for a second. In that blink of darkness, Walter screamed. Something had touched him. They lit an emergency flare. The red glow painted the chamber in blood-like color, revealing more than they wanted to see. Fingernail marks, not just on the walls, but on the ceiling. And bones, so many bones, crushed, split, arranged in patterns. In the center of the room, a rusted miner's helmet sat atop a stone, covered in dried blood and tangled white hair. "That's it," Frank whispered. "The old man, the one from the stories." Eli nodded, voice grim. Connor. According to legend, the old miner, Connor, had spent his final years digging day and night, obsessed with striking gold. He never found it. Some say he died in his sleep, others that he got lost in the tunnels and was buried alive. But none of the legends mentioned what they saw next. The flare flickered. A low, grinding growl echoed through the chamber, not from a throat, but from deep within the rock itself. The walls moved. Veins pulsed beneath the stone. A crack opened behind the pile of bones. A doorway, hidden until now. And from it, the sound of metal striking rock. Slow, steady, endless. Clink, clink, clink. They stood, mesmerized. Frank turned to Eli. "We should go back. We can't." Too late. The opening behind them had sealed shut. Stone had shifted. There was no way back. "Forward," Eli whispered. "It's the only way now." They stepped into the deeper tunnel, and somewhere, just ahead, a lantern burned, swinging gently, with no one holding it. The lantern swayed slowly, as if caught in the breath of the earth itself. No footsteps, no sound of wind, just the creaking of the chain suspending it, and that relentless sound deeper ahead. Clink, clink, clink. Eli took the lead now, pistol aimed into the shadows, though he knew deep down it would be useless. Behind him, Frank clutched an old pickaxe they'd found near the bones. Walter's hand shook as he gripped a flashlight, the beam flickering like a dying star. As they moved forward, the tunnel changed. No longer stone, the walls were smooth, almost melted, burnt, blackened, and etched with marks, not symbols but faces. Human faces, stretched and screaming, carved into the rock as if they'd tried to push through and failed. Walter stopped. This isn't mining, this is something else. They heard it again, breathing, right behind them, slow, wet, as if lungs long rotted were struggling to remember how. They spun. Nothing. But now, where the lantern had swung, it was gone. Frank stepped back, and his foot crunched on something. He looked down, a tooth, old, human, then another, and another. A whole trail leading forward like breadcrumbs into madness. They followed it, though every instinct screamed not to. The tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber. At its center stood an altar built from mine carts, bones, and rusted tools twisted into unnatural shapes. Hanging above it by rusted chains was a body, or what was left of one, headless, skin sloughed off, hollow. And kneeling at the altar was him, the old miner, Connor. Back-turned, pickaxe in hand, still digging, but not in the ground. He was digging into the body, over and over, metal on bone. Clink, clink, clink. Then he stopped. The air thickened. Eli whispered, "He sees us." Connor slowly stood. No rush, as if he'd been expecting this moment, as if he wanted it. He turned around. His face, or what was left of it, was a charred mask, features melted, only one eye still intact. The other socket burned red from within. His mouth stretched open, jaw broken wide, dangling like a snapped trap. He didn't scream. He smiled. Then everything went black. The lights, the flare, the air itself, gone. And in the pitch black, they heard his whisper right in their ears. "You came for gold. You'll stay for ash." Darkness wrapped around them like a living thing, thick, suffocating, absolute, the kind of dark that had weight, memory, hunger. Eli shouted, but no sound came. His mouth moved, his throat strained, but all that emerged was a faint wheeze, swallowed by the silence. Frank's flashlight sputtered back to life for just a second, and caught Walter, now standing several feet away from them, eyes wide and unblinking, staring into nothing. "Walter?" Frank called, voice cracking. Walter didn't respond. His lips trembled as though whispering something, but when they drew closer, they realized he was repeating one word: deeper, deeper, deeper. Frank reached for him. But Walter suddenly turned and ran into a narrow passage in the wall that hadn't been there before. "Wait!" Eli shouted. They gave chase, turning into the tight, sloping tunnel, the walls closing in like a throat. The air stank of rot and fire. Every few steps, they passed discarded lanterns, crushed helmets, rusted shovels, and more teeth. Too many teeth. Finally, they found Walter. He was kneeling in the middle of a stone chamber, hands clasped together as if praying, but his skin was gray, stretched thin, veins blackened. His hair had turned completely white. He looked up at them slowly and smiled. But it wasn't Walter's smile. It was Connor's, that same crooked grin, jaw hanging too wide, eyes far too empty. Then came the noise again, clink, clink, clink. But this time, it was inside the walls. All around them, the stone began to tremble. Cracks split open across the ground. Voices emerged from those cracks, hundreds of them, crying, screaming, laughing, whispering. Eli grabbed Frank by the shoulder. "We have to go, now." But when they turned, the tunnel they'd come from was gone. In its place stood a narrow mine shaft descending straight into the earth, glowing with a dim, reddish light like burning coals. From within it came a sound they would never forget. Not footsteps. Dragging. Something massive, heavy, alive, and breathing. Frank began to back away, but the ground beneath him collapsed, and he fell, screaming, into the red light below. Eli reached for him, too late. He looked back at Walter, who was now standing again, blood pouring from his eyes and nose, hands raised like a preacher mid-sermon. And behind him, Connor, closer than ever. No pickaxe this time, just his hands, long, burned, dripping, reaching. Eli ran. Through the stone, through the dark, not knowing where, only that if he stopped, he'd never move again. And as he fled, the voice echoed through the tunnels behind him, louder than ever. Mine, mine, mine! Eli didn't remember how long he ran. The tunnels twisted and turned like a living maze, always just one breath behind the echoes of something ancient, something relentless. The walls began to change. They were no longer carved stone, but fused flesh and rock. Pulsing veins snaked through the stone like roots, and every few feet, Eli passed what looked like a human hand reaching out of the wall. Some clawed, others curled into fists, frozen mid-scream. The deeper he went, the hotter it got. The air was thick with sulfur and blood, and with every inhale, Eli felt more lightheaded, more disconnected from reality. But then, a sound, a heartbeat. Not his, not human, deep, slow, thunderous. Boom, boom, boom. He followed it, step by trembling step, until the tunnel widened into a massive cavern. It was there that he saw them. Bodies. Dozens, no hundreds of them, nailed into the rock, wrapped in wire, their eyes still open, mouths sewn shut, faces twisted in fear and agony, as if time had never let them die. At the center of the cavern stood a monolithic altar, forged from collapsed mining carts, tools, and bones. On top of it, Frank, still alive. Barely. His body was pinned in place by rusted spikes, and from his chest leaked a thick, black liquid that hissed when it touched the floor. Eli screamed his name, rushed forward, but the ground cracked beneath him, and Connor emerged. No longer a ghost. No longer a man. He was enormous now, at least 10 feet tall, his body made of coal, sinew, and wire. His mouth no longer stitched shut, but a black void, constantly gasping as if devouring light. One eye glowed red-hot like molten iron, the other empty, and in his hand. A pickaxe fused to his arm, forever mining. Connor raised the weapon and the walls of the cavern screamed. Frank tried to lift his head. Don't let him take... But before he could finish, Connor struck the altar. The entire cavern shuddered. Flames burst from the cracks. The bodies in the walls moved, their sewn mouths twitching open, releasing centuries of screams. Eli dove behind a slab of stone, heart pounding, as the cave began to collapse in on itself. Through the chaos, he saw Frank's eyes lock with his, pleading. And just before the altar was consumed in flame, Frank whispered one final word. Trap. Eli turned and ran again, the collapsing world behind him. But this time, the mind didn't fight him. It guided him. Left, down, through, out. Until at last, a thin beam of daylight broke through a crack in the wall. He clawed toward it, hands bleeding, lungs burning, until he burst through the side of the mountain and rolled down a rocky hill into cold daylight. He gasped, cried, and vomited black ash. Ashcroft stood silent in the fog behind him, unmoving, as if nothing had happened. But when he looked at his hands, his fingertips were coated in coal dust, and faintly, beneath his skin, he could feel the mine pulsing, still inside him, still calling. For weeks, Eli said nothing. He was found by a hiker 2 miles from Ashcroft, wandering barefoot, covered in bruises, and mumbling to himself in a hoarse whisper. The hospital ran every test they could. Physically, he was fine. No concussion, no infection, no internal damage. But his mind was another story. Eli wouldn't speak about the mine. Not to the doctors, not to the sheriff, not to the families who begged him for answers about Walter and Frank. He just stared, sometimes at the floor, sometimes at the walls, and sometimes, most often, at the dirt under his fingernails. Because no matter how much he scrubbed, how hard he tried, the coal dust wouldn't come off. 3 months later, Eli returned to Ashcroft. No one knew he left. No note, no call. But when the sheriff finally noticed his absence, they found his car parked at the edge of the forest trail, keys still in the ignition, headlights dimmed by fog. There were no footprints, no signs of a struggle, just one thing taped to the dashboard: a faded map of Ashcroft, and written in shaking handwriting across the top: "It won't stop calling." What followed were weeks of strange reports. Locals claimed to see lights deep in the mountains, flickering, unnatural, like lanterns swinging in dead hands. Hikers heard tools clinking underground, rhythmic and unending. One teenager swore he saw a figure standing at the old mine entrance at dawn. "He had no mouth," the boy said, "but he was screaming." The authorities dismissed it all. Superstition, mass hysteria, small-town ghost stories, until the disappearances started again. 3 hikers, 2 surveyors, 1 forest ranger. Gone, every single one last seen near Ashcroft. And the last message anyone ever received from them? A radio transmission. Just static. Then a voice. Barely a whisper, but clear enough. Still mining. Still mining. The legend of the old Connor mine is a warning now. A curse. Some say the mine itself is alive, that every soul who enters becomes part of it, bound to the tunnels, trapped in the rhythm of pickaxes and screams. Others believe Eli is still down there, deeper than anyone's ever gone, still running, or worse, still digging, because in Ashcroft nothing stays buried forever, especially not the past. And if you listen closely, on cold mountain nights, you might just hear it. 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3. Connor's still working, and now he's not alone.